Becoming a fossil is an incredibly rare occurrence. Most of us can only dream that such a fate would happen to us. From a statistical perspective, fossils aren't exactly rare, but the process of becoming one is incredibly harsh. Even so, Earth has witnessed countless lives come and go. After all, at this very moment, there are still tens of millions of animal species coexisting with us on this planet, so the number of fossils is still enormous. In fact, there's an entire industry built around them. However, despite their vast numbers, most fossils are pretty ordinary. They could be remains of creatures we already know, or new species within familiar groups. Even when they're new, they usually belong to phyla we're already well acquainted with, like some kind of hadrosaur, for example. The truly bizarre fossils that leave scientists baffled are very rare, but discoveries that shake the scientific world do happen. In extremely rare cases, scientists come across traces of creatures never seen before, completely unclassifiable, and the Tullimenstrum is a prime example of that. The Tullimenstrum wasn't just odd-looking, it radiated an otherworldly strangeness. Scientists couldn't place it within any known animal phylum. It was first discovered in 1966 by an amateur fossil collector. At the time, he was exploring an ancient geological layer in Illinois, USA, and accidentally came across many strange fossils. He could tell that it used to be some kind of creature, but exactly what it was, he had no idea. So he brought the fossil to the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago. But even the experts were just as confused. What lay before them looked like a cigar-shaped creature, triangular fins, and eyes perched on two long stalks. Its mouth sat at the end of a protrusion that looked like a trunk, making it resemble a monster straight out of a sci-fi horror film. Fortunately, it wasn't very big. Most specimens were less than 35 centimeters long. Still, its bizarre and grotesque appearance quickly caught the attention of scientists, both domestic and international. But even with many experts gathered, no one could clearly explain what it actually was. Some hypothesized it might be a mollusk, an arthropod, an annelid worm, some kind of strange fish, or even a completely unknown vertebrate. The only viewpoint that gained some consensus was that it lived in water. Even though Illinois is known today as the Prairie State, hundreds of millions of years ago, this area was once covered by a shallow sea. Based on the discovery site, it may have been a creature that swam freely in the ocean, occasionally washing ashore with the tides. Yet even to this day, scientists' understanding of it remains very limited. The only thing confirmed is that it belongs to the phylum Bilateria, a group that makes up nearly 98% of all known animal species. Over the decades, some have claimed to have solved the mystery of its identity, but none have gained wide acceptance. Currently, a popular theory suggests it was a predator, using its unique mouth structure to hunt in seawater, possibly preferring murky waters. But beyond that, everything remains a mystery, and the story of bizarre fossils doesn't end there. In the 1970s in Montana, another strange and unprecedented fossil was discovered, never seen before. This creature was so bizarre that no one wanted to study it. It was even jokingly nicknamed the alien goldfish. It was unearthed from the Bear Gulch limestone formation. Dates back even further than the Tullimenstrum. It can be traced back to around 330 million years ago. Because of its incredibly alien shape, this fossil wasn't seriously studied for a long time, as researchers didn't want to confront such a thorny issue. Based on limited clues, the creature had a slender body, and a tail that allowed it to swim freely. But the most shocking part was that it had no external appendages whatsoever, and no structures between its torso and anus. Inside its body, it had a bizarre organ never seen before, and never found again. It was later named the iron sac, because it contained an unusually high concentration of iron. No one knows what this organ was for. When scientists encounter such ancient, completely unfamiliar fossils, their approach is to temporarily assign them to a group that's vague but possibly related. This time, they chose the group Conodonta, a type of jawless vertebrate. At first, this seemed reasonable, because a newly discovered fossil appeared to show conodont-like teeth. But not long after, a new study revealed that those teeth were actually inside its stomach. It had eaten a conodont, and those teeth belonged to its prey, not to itself. In other words, it wasn't a conodont, it was a predator that fed on them. Once again, we were back to square one. Only this time, we at least knew it was a carnivorous creature. Studies on this mysterious organism, later named Typhloesus, saw almost no progress for 35 years, until December 2002. When a shocking new finding broke the silence, scientists proposed a bold, but unconfirmed, hypothesis that Typhloesus might actually be a mollusk. It might sound strange. This Typhloesus creature might actually be a mollusk. It sounds a bit strange, but this hypothesis was based on an extremely rare finding. Inside the body of Typhloesus, there existed a tooth-like organ that could suddenly extend outward to catch prey. Although it sounds unbelievable, in reality, some animals are actually capable of similar actions. For example, some mollusks have a structure called a radula, like a tongue, that can shoot out to grab food. Because of this, scientists attempted to link Typhloesus to these creatures. However, further studies revealed something unexpected. This tooth-like structure isn't exclusive to mollusks. It had independently evolved in some other species that aren't mollusks. So based on this evidence alone, it's still not enough to confirm the true identity of Typhloesus. Luckily, it was a solitary organism, unlike many other mysterious fossils that often appear in pairs. Even so, within the same formation as the Tullimenstrom, that is, the Mauzan Creek Formation in Illinois, two other strange fossil types were discovered. Their shapes were so bizarre that they could only be named with letters: the H-shaped animal and the Y-shaped animal. These two creatures were respectively named Acrotiscus and Atacystus, although they aren't biologically related. Because of their appearances resembling the letters H and Y, they came to be collectively known as the alphabet animals. Among them, the H-shaped one is even stranger. Its shape truly resembles a capital letter H, with a strange raised structure in the middle. Scientists know almost nothing about its structure or its function, but some researchers speculate that it may have lived in colonies, feeding by absorbing organic particles, floating in the water, and remained fixed in place for life. Based on the fossils discovered, these creatures came in very different sizes, and the shape of the raised portion varied from individual to individual. Some were round, heart-shaped, or even took on more complex forms. Although this theory remains quite vague, scientists believe that, based on its anatomical structure, it most likely belongs to the phylum Hemichordata, which makes it related to creatures like acorn worms and arrow worms. Compared to it, the Y-shaped creature looks much gentler in appearance, but its classification is even more complex. It somewhat resembles cnidarians, like jellyfish or sea anemones, but it has traits that members of this phylum simply don't have, such as bilateral symmetry, a complete digestive system, and even an anus. All of this completely overturned scientists' initial assumptions about it. At present, the only thing we know for sure is that its mouth is located in the gap between its two arms. But whether those arms are actual limbs is still unknown. And if you've made it this far, you now know more than 80% of other people. Now let's take a look back at the earliest stage of life on Earth, a strange and mysterious era known as the Ediacaran period. It took place roughly between 635 and 538 million years ago. This was the period when complex, large-bodied organisms first appeared in the fossil record. It was a time that produced countless bizarre creatures that to this day we still can't classify. There's one species I can only describe as a final boss from the game Elden Ring. If that boss happened to be a tree made of flesh and bone, then this creature may very well have actually existed. Let me introduce its name. Nomicalathus**. It possesses an eerie number of traits, making it a truly unsettling ancient organism. When its fossil was first discovered, the only thing people could say was, this looked like the dwelling of an alien creature, especially the massive opening at the top. That gave people the chills. Aside from that opening, researchers had absolutely no idea what they had found. Its shape did resemble a tree somewhat, but when scientists studied the trunk-like material, they discovered it wasn't a plant, but an animal. What's more, it turned out to be one of the earliest animals with a skeletal structure ever found on Earth. Later on, researchers even discovered fossils representing its external body surface, which only made the creature seem stranger, like something out of a nightmare. Because the truth is, the body surface of Nomicalathus was covered in countless tentacle-like structures. These tentacles might have been used for grasping. It also had rows and rows of sharp spines. Any creature that came into contact with it likely wouldn't make it out alive, and thanks to that opening on top we mentioned, scientists later discovered its surface didn't just have one hole, but was covered in many strange pores scattered throughout. These pores came in various sizes, and may have been filled with organic tissue when it was alive. Their exact function remains unclear, but scientists speculate they could be related to sensing, excretion, absorption, or even feeding. What's even more unsettling is that the shapes of these holes were incredibly varied, not just circles, but also hearts, crescents, hexagons, and all sorts of geometric patterns. Almost every bizarre shape you can imagine. It could even adjust its size depending on environmental conditions, and could suddenly appear in different habitats. Still, due to its terrifying appearance, it likely lived in the deep, desolate regions of the ocean. The question remains, what exactly was this creature? Some have attempted to classify it as a type of coral, but research shows its structure is far more complex than that of typical corals. Much more so, corals simply can't account for its bizarre form, so we still can't determine its true identity. The only thing we know for certain is that it truly existed, and had an extremely unusual form, while it was one of the most astonishing creatures of its time. Back then, there were still many other unbelievable organisms that coexisted. For example, there was a creature known as the mystery carpet worm. It looked exactly like the bath mat in your bathroom, but it was alive, and it could move. Carpet-like creatures were not uncommon at the time. To this day, we still can't explain their biological traits, such as those of Vendia, Sprigina, and many others. There were so many of these bizarre creatures that scientists eventually had to group them all into a temporary category called the Ediacaran biota. Members of this biota, from hundreds of millions of years ago, left us countless fossils with bizarre forms. And what's puzzling is, despite their vast variety and abundance, we still can't accurately determine their relationship to other known animal groups. The only thing we can say is, they truly were a part of Earth's living history. But which branch of life they belonged to remains a mystery. Not only is classifying them a mystery, but their morphology and lifestyles have sparked major debates. To this day, no single hypothesis has been widely accepted. One thing that particularly bothers me is, although they appear to be very symmetrical, they're actually a bit asymmetrical. See, this line isn't symmetrical at all. It's just unacceptable. Even stranger, they may not have left behind any descendants. In other words, they may have been an evolutionary dead end. But to be honest, that might not necessarily be a bad thing. Of course, you might be feeling that these fossil stories are starting to sound a bit repetitive, but it doesn't stop there. Because there's a time period even stranger than all of this. It's called the Rhyoshan period. To understand this era, you have to travel back in time. Way, way back, specifically 2 billion years ago. At that time, Earth, no matter how you looked at it, was a world completely dominated by monsters. After all, the name, Rhyoshan, is related to the flow of magma. And during this period, a special region began to form that scientists later called the Francevilian biota, in what is now Gabon. There, scientists discovered a vast area of black shale, a type of sedimentary rock. These sediment layers date back to the Rhyoshan period, and contain numerous strange structures. Many of these structures are disc-shaped, some nearly circular, others more elongated. Over time, other shapes were discovered as well, including rods, plates, and even shapes that resembled blooming flowers. These structures were so complex and bizarre that scientists weren't even sure whether they could be considered fossils. At first, the researchers who discovered the site believed they were multicellular organisms with eukaryotic cells that lived in colonies. However, not everyone agreed with this conclusion. Some suggested they weren't organisms at all, but rather structures formed by geological changes or sedimentary system anomalies. If these truly were organisms, then the implications would be revolutionary. It would push back the timeline of multicellular life by over 400 million years. Studying something that's over 2 billion years old is extremely challenging. We can't easily determine whether these structures were actually traces of life or not. For many decades afterward, this issue sparked endless debate. It wasn't until recent years that several new studies began leaning toward one conclusion. These structures were very likely actual fossils. An isotope analysis revealed that these structures were rich in zinc, an element possibly linked to early metabolic activity. Just last year, other scientists pointed out that this area contains all the essential elements required to support life. It's safe to say that the controversy over this discovery was so intense that only recently did we dare to call them fossils. And what's even more unbelievable is, if the Francevillean biota were truly organisms, we might even be able to infer their lifestyle based on their disc shape and lack of mobility. They probably weren't free-swimming creatures, but planktonic organisms, drifting in the shallow seas. At that time, such environments were rare, because most of Earth was still land. Behind all this, there are even more baffling cases, such as animals that, although they resemble familiar creatures, are incredibly difficult to explain in terms of structure or evolution. Let me give you another example. Nectocarus. Its fossil was first discovered in 1910 in Canada, in the famous Burgess Shale Formation. At the time, this site yielded so many fossils every year that some specimens ended up forgotten for decades, until a British paleontologist reorganized the materials and proposed that this was a new mysterious species. It looked somewhat like a stretched-out shrimp, so it was nicknamed swimming shrimp. But upon closer examination, he discovered that this creature, despite some similarities to arthropods, had a head structure that was completely different from any known arthropod. Its head structure was, in fact, the exact opposite of typical arthropod anatomy. This made him unable to confidently classify it. In the end, he had no choice but to reluctantly place it in the unclassified group. Many decades later, its story was finally revisited. Many decades later, an Italian paleontologist re-examined the photographs. He believed he had found the answer. He speculated it was a chordate, based on the shape of its tail fin, and another unique structure he considered a defining trait. Surprisingly, this idea was accepted and persisted for over 25 years, until a new problem arose in 2010. Scientists rediscovered 91 more well-preserved specimens, and the results showed this creature looked nothing like a deformed shrimp, but more like a soft-bodied animal, with 2 tentacles, a flat body, and 2 eyes, but no mouth or digestive organs. The only opening was a large funnel-shaped structure. Some speculated this could be a proboscis that could turn inside out, due to its strong resemblance to cephalopods. Researchers once believed this could be the earliest known cephalopod species, predating all others by 30 million years. However, problems arose immediately. Its structure did not align at all with our understanding of cephalopod evolution. It was like finding a fossil of a modern human that predates all primates. So the cephalopod hypothesis was ultimately rejected, and we returned to square one. The only recent progress was the discovery of another fossil very similar to it, found in 2019, named the new Nectocarus. It's now believed that both belong to the same family group. Currently, the group is called Nectocarididae, a fossil family without an officially recognized classification. Scientists believe they may be related, but their exact position is still uncertain. Right now, they remain in taxonomic limbo. with no clear placement in the tree of life. In short, the history of life doesn't always come with clear answers.